my screen. So I'm going to start with DB Visualizer and talk you through the backend tables. And I'll also bounce a little bit back and forth between here and the user interface and action builder as well, so you can get a sense of how these different pieces fit together. To start, this might look a little overwhelming. And that's okay. So this is our back end of Action Builder. So anytime you add information to Action Builder, it's written to our database here. And the Action Builder SQL Mirror is just that, it's a mirror. So it's a replica, just a version of all of these tables that then is not editable by you. And because of the way Action Builder is structured, each organization gets its own schema on the back end. So when you log into the SQL Mirror for the first time, you're going to see all of these different schemas for all of the different organizations who are using Action Builder. You will only have access to see the data that you have been given permission to. So when you contact us to get access to the SQL Mirror, I'll be creating a user account for you. And that user account will only have permissions to actually access the data, the information in the tables for your organization. If you create multiple organizations for your union or for your group, you'll need to reach out to me so that I can grant you access to each of those organizations. Another quick note in terms of additional security precautions that we put in place here is you'll only be able to access the SQL Mirror from IP addresses that we've whitelisted. So your IP address is kind of your address when you're using the internet. And you can search what's my IP and it'll give you, like in Google or anywhere else, and it'll give you the IP address that you're using, your address on the internet. And we'll whitelist that IP address so that when you're using the internet from your home or wherever you're at, you'll be able to access the SQL Mirror. And this is to prevent somebody from, some coffee shop or somebody getting access to your information, your username and password, and then being able to access Action Builder's backend through that. Good question in the chat. In terms of whitelisted IPs, most of us are working from home or on dynamic IPs. Is there a forwarding or proxy solution you can recommend? Yeah, basically any VPN is great. So you can set up a VPN and then you can access Action Builder through that IP address that you've set up through that VPN. Nordware is one that I've heard people use and like. Jeff, do you have any other recommendations? You're muted, Jeff.
I think what most folks do, at least what I do is, is like the IP address we have whitelisted is like the AFL-CIO like building IP address, and then I use our work VPN. So if that I think a lot of that's like a fairly common workflow. People just use their office VPN. If you don't have one, then there's lots of other ones out there, but that's what we do.
Yeah. NordVPN. Yeah, dedicated IP. So those sorts of dedicated IPs are a great choice. Another question in the chat. So if we use a VPN at Smart, we can go through that. Absolutely. That is very right. You can go for that there, and that'll be good. Sorry, cat on lap. There we go. So hopping back into the SQL Mirror itself, and definitely please keep all these questions coming. This is great. When you log in, you're going to see this list of all of the schemas. The tool that I'm using to look at the database, what you're seeing right here, is called DB Visualizer. And you can see this is the free version. I haven't re-upped my contract with them. It's great. It's free. It's easy to download, and it'll look just like this. So this is just a way of visualizing databases. There's a bunch of other software out there. A lot of it is great. Jeff, do you have any recommendations for folks who are using Max or other systems that you want to throw out there?
The one I use is called Table Plus.
Nope, great. You dropped it in the chat too.
Yeah, there's like a million of them out there. Yeah, so you can find one that you like. Anything that supports the database will work. So yeah, anything that supports a Postgres database will be fine.
Exactly. And you'll get information about the server name, the port, the database, all of the information to fill out this connection information when you get set up on the SQL Mirror. So we walk you through all of these different items and what you need to fill out in order to make the connection work there. So super straightforward. I'm going to now hop over to the actual structure of the SQL Mirror here. So you have all those schemas. You're going to click expand or double click on your schema. I'm going to walk through the Action Builder demo, the AB demo database today. So every schema will share the same tables. So you see this very long list of tables here. Let me just make it so that you can see all of them. So it can seem really overwhelming at first. That is a lot of different tables here. But the good news is you won't need nearly any of these tables for reporting. You only need probably about a half dozen. And I'm going to really focus on those tables today. So starting with users, I'm going to hop over here. This is where you have your users table with all the information about your users. When I click on it, it takes me to the column section. But here I can click on data and actually see the information for all of the user accounts here, including current sign-in, last sign-in, the IP addresses that people signed in at, so you can see where they signed in from, if they've been confirmed or not. So if somebody's confirmed when they actually log in for the first time, you can see information about when an invite was sent. Lots of information here about users, most of which you can ignore. But if you're going to want to get breakouts of information tags that have been applied by a user, you're going to want to map to this users table. Next, I'm going to hop up here to the entities. So we've got our users. Entities is where you actually have the information about people. So here we've got all of the fake information that has been loaded to Action Builder. We have an ID for every entity that is created. So we have our first name, we have our last name, preferred language, who created them. So this created by ID 10 relates to the users table, relates to the first column of the users table. It's just called ID in the users table, but here it's created by ID. We have the date that this record was created. We have the interact ID, which is our internal ID, also referred sometimes as the Action Builder ID in the user interface. And then we have additional custom IDs visible here as well. So this is where any custom IDs that you load would be present. In terms of entities as well, you can now have multiple entity types. So that's something to keep in mind here as well. The entity type ID is this last column on the far right. So if you do have multiple entity types, that entity type ID will then relate to the first column of this entity types table. So here we have different types of entities. So you could join those two tables together, mapping the entity type ID to the ID column, this ID here in the entity types table, to be able to map, break apart different entities. So you could narrow to where entity type ID equals 1 would only pull the people entities from that list. And I'm going to use a little bit of SQL jargon here. This isn't going to be like a full SQL training. We can definitely refer you to other folks who could get you trained up on SQL if that's something that's interesting to you. So that's the basics of users and then people in the system. But really what you generally want to report on are assessments and then of course the responses themselves. So that's where we're heading next. If I double click on assessments, assessments is really straightforward. It is the ID column for every assessment that has ever been applied. The assessment level is that 1 through 4, 1 through 5 scale, whatever you've set the assessments to be. We have the campaign ID. So in what campaign was this assessment applied? Assessments are campaign specific. Then you've got the owner ID and the owner type. So owner ID here is the ID from the entities table, that first column in the entities table. And then the type is entity because that's what has an assessment. Then you have who created it, which relates back to the user table, when it was created, when it was updated as well. Before we hop into fields and responses, I'm going to show you the campaigns table. Super straightforward. Each campaign has an ID and then a name. And then it does say which user created the campaign, when it was created, when it's been updated. And it does have a target number as well that's visible in the UI. A lot of folks don't use it, but you can set a number of entities you want to be present in a campaign to be able to reference that number in the user interface as well. Hopping now down, I am going to talk through tag categories and tags. Tag categories are an ancient name way back in the Action Builder past. It is what is now called fields in the system. So each field, which is kind of that like question in the user interface, has an ID and it has a name. So what's somebody's job title? What's their level of involvement? Have they signed a card or not? These are fields in the system, but tag categories here. Oh, good question in the Q&A. So it sounds like the assessments table is what you would use to craft a movement report. 100% yes. Completely, exactly correct. And in fact, you could craft a movement report using just the assessments table. Pretty easy to do. You would just export that information out into a CSV and then, run a couple quick pivots and you'd have that movement report.
And I'll show an example of a movement report in a minute.
Yeah, but fantastic question. Looks like we have a question in the chat too. Oh yeah, just a woohoo. So yes, agreed. So this tag categories table is getting into all of that other information that you're tracking. These are all of the fields across every campaign, across every entity type, across all of that. So we've got whether, they have different features in the system. So are they multi-select? Can you choose multiple responses? Are they locked, meaning fields and the responses can't be added by activists or organizers? Who created that field? What section are they under? So section headers in Action Builder are in this side called tag groups, but we can kind of ignore tag groups for reporting purposes. What type is it? So is it a date type, a standard type, a notes type, all of that information. And then here in the target type column, does this live on an entity or an entity connection? Is also an important note here. And then we have a target ID here as well. So entity type, this lives on people. So it refers back to that entity type table that we saw before. And then entity connection type refers to the entity connections table. Does it live on the people to people connections or the people to employer connections? And those have different IDs associated with them as well. We also just recently deployed the ability to have read-only fields, meaning that only admins could edit them, change them, like add new responses to people. For instance, if you wanted to upload membership status from a membership database, you could make that field read only, and then only admins would be able to apply it on upload. So pretty straightforward there. Tags then in the system is very similar to this tag categories, where that's the fields. Tags is all of the responses in Action Builder. So this is every response. Every response has an ID. And then it relates to the tag category this tag category ID. So if you wanted to get all of the tags for a particular tag category or particular field, you would say where tag category ID equals 150, and that would pull all of the tag categories for like event attendance or action participation. You've got when a particular response was created, when it was updated. Again, that target type, does it live, is it something that you apply to people? Is it something that you apply to like people to employer connections based off of these different IDs over here? And then the heart of all of this is the taggable logbook. So this is the sort of mega table of every response that is applied to every entity in any campaign. So we've already walked through all these tables. Every response gets an ID. Every time a response is applied, it gets an ID. Here we have the ID of the response, which refers back to the tags table. Here we have which campaign that response was applied in, who created the link between an entity and the response. This relates to the user table. When was this link between an entity and a response created? Is that created at, updated at? If it's updated, usually it'll be the same. Don't need to worry about that. But you can delete response. And if you deleted a response, that would change the updated at date. Is it currently available in the campaign? Did you hide it or unhide it? That's that available. And then taggable ID and taggable type. Now this is who actually has this response applied to their profile. So here we have like ID 22224, which is an entity. So this would relate to that entity's table and tell you who got this response applied. These tables, these are like the basics of what you need to know, the information you need in order to run reports. You know, there's other tables in here that are helpful. Addresses, emails, all the addresses, emails that have been applied, phone numbers. But this is the basics. I've got a question in the chat. As data gets updated, deleted, or merged, how fast does the SQL Mirror update? That's a great question. I feel like it's instantaneous because it's just a replica of exactly what's happening in the user interface. But Jeff, any?
I think it's more or less real time. I think potentially there could be slight. I don't think there's noticeable delays on it.
Yep.
If there was like a ton of data being changed at once, maybe it might take it 30 seconds to catch up or something like that. But it should not be very far behind.
Yeah, great question. I'm going to just hop over here to show you like a little query that I wanted to pull up as a demo before we dig into Jeff's beautiful, beautiful queries and dashboard. I'm hyping it up maybe too much, Jeff.
We'll let people judge for themselves.
So what I did here, oh, we got one in the chat. How do notes appear in the logbook? Oh, Brian, great question. So there is this this mega table.
So global notes.
Yeah, I always become blind. There we go. Global notes here. So this is a really important question. So we have these like fancy fields, right? You can have like date type fields and note type fields and all these different types of fields. That information goes into this mega global notes table. And if I scroll all the way to the right here, we get this information about like, okay, owner type and owner ID. So some notes live on entities. Some notes live on entity relationships. Some notes live on entity connections. But then we have these notes that live on the responses. So then you get these taggable logbook owner types. And so if we jump over here, we've got like this date type field. And so this date type field has this 2/26/2021, and it relates to this ID. And then it's on this response 5046 from Taggable Logbook. And the same will be true for note type responses, they'd also have this taggable logbook ID. So this is like the ID for the response. And then that will live on there as well. So everything goes into this global notes. Another important table, especially helpful if you're pulling reports on like membership card sign date and you've got membership card sign as a date type field. The taggable logbook will be pretty critical for that as well. The global notes plus taggable logbook together will be very important for that. Really good question. So here untitled. So this is just showing you like some quick joins. But I wanted to make it like a simple, transparent query. So like say I wanted to like select the emails for users and the user role and the user first name. And then I wanted to select the name of the tag category that they've applied and the name of the response that they applied. Here I renamed tag category's name as field and tag's name as response. So it would match what's in the UI, these column headers. And then I just did these joins. So I joined together the users table, the taggable logbook table, the tags table and the tag categories table to create this table really quickly. And this is a pretty ugly SQL query, but it just shows you that like doing these joins is very doable. Pulling it different information together across these tables can be done in a way to get you a little quick idea of like, okay, here's all of my people, what have they applied? You could do different groupings on as well. So you could like group on people here to get a breakdown of like counts of different fields and responses that have been applied by different users. But I didn't do those fancy permutations. Are there any other questions before I kick it to Jeff to start to show you a little bit about how this information can be done, can be used to create beautiful reports? Feel free to drop it in the chat, the Q&A. You can also raise your hand too. Oh, we do have a hand raised. Brian, I just unmuted you.
Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify my notes question, which was specifically about like notes that are kept in the notes section of the profile. Would those also be in global notes and how would they appear? Thank you.
Totally. Great question. So I'm going to click on global notes here again. So this mega table is also where all the notes that live on people or other entities exist. So you can see these this type. So here we've got an entity that has a note called today and followed up, and it lives on the entity itself there. So you could here actually I'm gonna do a quick select all from global notes where here we've got, I think it's called entity, where owner type equals entity. Oh. Must not be called entity, or maybe it's case sensitive. I don't know what I did wrong, but okay, we'll figure that out later. But point being, yes, Brian, you could absolutely see all of the notes that live on entities here as well. Another, do we have a manual for what ID links to which ID? Yes, so there is in the Help Center some SQL Mirror documentation that lays out all of the different columns in each of the tables and which ID links to what. So you can refer to that documentation in the Help Center. Great question, Christina. And in the chat, yay, okay, I'm glad you got it, Brianne. I was worried, but yeah, that should work well for you. Other questions, thoughts in the chat? Sweet, I'm sure more will come up, and we're excited to dig in on them. So Jeff, I will kick it to you.
Cool. All right. Let me. Doesn't look like I can share my screen.
Oh, let's see there. Allow.
Oh, all right, there it goes.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Other Jeff.
So, so these are the this is the tables or the reports we've built out. So, and actually, just for folks that I don't know, so I'm Jeff. I'm at the AFL-CIO on our data analytics infrastructure team. And so to kind of give some background on what we were trying to do here, the goal with when we were creating these dashboards was to kind of try to create like a generic and like reusable set of like reporting dashboards that we could spin up for affiliates using the tool. We worked with a vendor to build these, and we're using a tool called Periscope, which has since been bought by a company called StySense. And what it does is, it connects to the SQL replica, and you can like kind of build out dashboards with different queries and like create charts from them. To be honest, I would, I'm like hesitant to like actually recommend Periscope as a tool. It is really good for some things, and then it seemed like it was going to be a really good fit for this project, and then we ran into a bunch of challenges with it, and it's also relatively expensive. And like as we were building it out, we found we needed other features, and then like they kept saying, oh well, yeah, I should need this like higher level, so we kept getting more and more expensive. So it there are other tools that can do data visualization stuff like this as well. Like Tableau is another common one that people use. It potentially we may be switching over to that for I don't know about for these dashboards, but for other visualization stuff, we like reporting dashboards we do at the AFL-CIO. And then there's other tools out there as well. So we built 3 dashboards, which I'll show you. And so this first one we're looking at right now is the campaign overview. Oh wait, okay. Is the campaign overview dashboard. So this is the idea here is to kind of see it in one particular campaign, like where you're at. And so the way that we set up this with Periscope is like, so we have these different like filters up here that we can like switch between different campaigns and like different parameters. This is like part of what made it like super complicated. So, if you're building like more something that's like tailored to one specific purpose, it would probably be easier. Like for example, with these like this field selector, there's like a bunch of really ugly like union queries that are like pulling these and trying to like link it, to have these cascading filters. But so this is kind of how it's built. But so we're looking at this dashboard demo campaign right now. It's showing us, our current assessment levels. And this is like the nice thing with Periscope is it kind of gives you these cool visualizations, and like you can, they're like interactive, so I can like drill down into different things. So just like kind of looking at the assessments, this is our breakdown. Like And then like this is the actual like SQL code behind it. Again, I think a lot of this is like made more complicated by this need to make it generic and like try to use that on for different campaign or different like organizations and different campaigns. And so like and Periscope does have some kind of like handy like this like database. This is like one of those, this is a variable that was set in one of those filters, so it lets you kind of like plug stuff in. It's the same kind of thing you could do if you were just like actually like more like writing code for a report, which honestly is like maybe how I would have done it if we had to start over. If we were starting over, is like I might actually just like use a charting like library. There's lots of like good like JavaScript visualization tools, and like could have probably made this better if we just built it with one of those, and trying to like instead of trying to like fit Periscope to our needs. But basically this is just like counting distinct assessments. So like that assessments table includes all of the assessments that were ever made. So this is trying to get like the most recent assessment. Some of this SQL is a little bit over my head. Like I don't actually know what this like partition by is doing. But that's so I think that you could definitely make this simpler if you were kind of like more looking at a single campaign. This is like kind of another cool thing we did is like we're actually using so campaigns in Action Builder have in this customize tab, you have this target number. And the idea behind this was like, let's set, regardless of how many people you currently have in your list, like you might know, in this like particular, work site for this, in this campaigns universe, there's 400 people there. I know, I may only know who, 200 of them are, but so you can set this target number, and then we use that target number here to see how close we are to hitting our assessment. So like we've assessed 72% of our target list, and then we use like the card signed field to say like how many, what's our card goals, and we set the, in this we made that the variable, but like so this is set so that the card sign goal is 65% of the total, and we are 82% of the way of getting there. Also have some, this also has like visualizations of a card signed and assessment over time, and like and also like broken down by week. This is supposed to be showing like a breakdown based on people who have a certain response. I don't think it's actually working. At least doesn't seem to be. And then we also do like a breakdown of like assessments by user per week. Yeah, so that's like, so this is the overview. Like it's this is kind of like probably of the most straightforward of the dashboards that we have. And like I think kind of creating something like this is probably not like terribly difficult if you're if you know like kind of what you're looking to include. Now I'm going to jump over to our movement dashboard, which is cool. So this is actually I think this is like I'm excited about. This was the most exciting one that that we built, I think. So the way this one is set up, so we're looking at that same like dashboard demo campaign, and we have it set up to look, and this is like, I honestly, this SQL is like all kind of way above me. But the idea, as I understand it, is that it's looking at the person's current assessment and their previous assessment, and yeah, it has to do some like kind of fancy work there to get those. But then it's showing, we had 25 people that that went from a 3 to a 2 or a 2 to a 1, and then 17 people that moved in the wrong direction. The most complicated part of this building this dashboard was figuring out how to label things, because the assessment scales work where 1 is the best and 5 is the worst. So like saying like, so when their assessment goes down, that's actually better. So actually like labeling that was tricky. What's positive, what's negative. The semantics there were difficult, but so it has this overall top lines. It has like across tabs of like, this is showing that people with their current assessment of 2, 6 of them were previously a 1, 5 of them were previously a 3, and 5 of them were 4. And then we also have it, this one is working by, this field that we chose, top workplace issue. It's showing that like people who have, better healthcare as their issue, they are moving in the right direction. People who had higher wages, they're going in the wrong direction. This was all just like random data, so I don't, it doesn't really mean anything, but you can see how this would be useful. Oh wow, there's a lot of questions in the chat.
Sharing SQL queries.
Queries, yeah.
We'll get it done.
Yeah, that's been on my list to do for a while. I would really like to. Where it gets difficult is this. There's like a bunch of like kind of Periscope specific stuff embedded in a lot of these. So trying to like pull together, like Periscope has like lets you have like snippets. So like this and like this, like so this is like a campaign filter snippet. So it's there's just a bunch of pieces here that have to be like cobbled together, and like Periscope really doesn't make it very easy to extract all of this, all the queries in like any kind of usable way. So I do want to like to do that. It's just I just have not had time.
Christina, great question about standard reports for data quality control. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know, like where I used to work, we would have things like if, I don't know, if someone's, if someone, we would have reports because I would just see stupid, like, I would see things dated wrong, right? Like before the campaign started, there was an action on it, on the campaign, like just things that didn't make sense. And right, it seems to me that Action Builder has some built-in data quality control at the interface level, but there's still always that other level of having to catch where those errors are. Like, for example, you can't set, my understanding, you can't set up on the interface when the date campaign starts, making sure all the actions are after. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so when you create a campaign, all the fields responses applied to people are by the nature of the user interface after the campaign starts. But that doesn't mean that people couldn't apply previous data like by accident through the global notes table.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Yeah. And then like there's other things like just I deal with this in my job now, just things like missing data, like like you have a name in a database but I don't have a phone number, what I'm saying? Like how am I going to be able, or an email, so how am I going to connect with them? So being able to have like some type of standing quality control reports, what is considered like where, and then it would like highlight, like I would stand it up in SAP business objects where it would be highlighted in red, bam, 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 your data is missing. You see what I'm saying?
I love it. Yeah. So I would love to open this up to the folks who are here, the other attendees, to jump in if any of you have created those. And there are a couple of different pieces here. So like doing any sort of like responses over time would give you like that quick visual look of like, wait, why are there a bunch of responses like membership card sign or like other things that are before the start date? So you could do that change over time graph to get some of that. And then, yeah, it's super easy to pull a list of I want a count of all of the people who have emails and phone numbers, but no addresses. I want a count of all of the people, you know, doing other sort of information like that, Christina. But I'd love it if folks want to jump in with anything that they've done.
I mean, I just wanted to ask you how much validation is built in at the data entry level, right?
Well, so the big thing is that the only thing that you need to create a new record, an action builder, is first name. And that's very purposeful, that there are plenty of times that you're talking to somebody and all you get is first name. There's also plenty of times where you actually do want to record historical information that's relevant for a campaign. So like membership card sign is like a really common one. Like people will upload that people signed a card 5 years ago. And that's like still relevant for whatever effort they're doing. And so we don't restrict that. Right now, we also don't give people the capability to restrict that. And that's like a potential future development feature. But yeah, right now, we don't have that in place.
I mean, I definitely think you could build out, you know, the kind of reports that you were suggesting, or, you know, that would like highlight data that, you know, based on rules that you've set, and then you would, you know, could then address, you know, that, you know, either fix the data or talk to the, you know, organizer who's entering that data and help them get it right. Cool. I'll just quickly show the third dashboard we have here. The third one is it's a multi-campaign dashboard. So the idea here is it shows all the campaigns in this instance, and you can see, you know, how many assessments they've had in the last 7 days. Which this is we're looking at our AFL-CIO demo instance, so it does not have any assessments in the last 7 days because it's not really like something that gets used day to day. And then we have some like charts here that show, you know, for each campaign, like how many assessments there are. I kind of like this one. This is showing like an assessment distribution per campaign. And this one is like same thing, but like just like with the actual levels of. And this one's fun. These are assessments by week, charted over time by campaign.
A good question for you in the chat, Jeff. Or you can take a crack at it first. So Julie asks, is there any way to compare what's an action builder to a current membership list to ID folks not on the list and then take them out?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think you could do that using, if you're storing your member IDs from your membership list as a custom ID and action builder, you could do an easy comparison between them. In terms of like taking them out, I guess it depends on whether you mean take them out of action builder or out of your membership database. There's not currently a way to like bulk remove people from action builder, although that's something that's like on the list. And then obviously, you know, on your membership database, that depends on your membership database.
Yeah, I would also say like storing membership IDs in Action Builder is like a great way to get like percentage of coverage. So like if every time you move membership database, membership information into Action Builder, you could create like a quick like, oh, 98% of my people have an ID from my membership database. Yay, that's a cool thing. Another question, do you have any dashboard parts that are focused on targets, like pressuring a politician to do X thing? And maybe, Jeff, this might get into some Action Network reporting that you all have
Yeah,
done.
I mean, so we don't have, I mean, the dashboards we built out here were focused on like a worksite organizing context. So yeah, so we don't have dashboards that are particular to yeah, but you know, that's, which isn't to say you couldn't, you know, build them. I think, you know, like you could definitely, you know, build dashboards that show any kind of information you're collecting you could definitely visualize those through the SQL Mirror. Like, the trick is figuring out like the right queries, and then then you can plug that into like either you can just use like Excel to create charts or other visualization tools.
And a quick note that was also in the Q&A, all the custom IDs are visible in the entities table. So that's the place where you can see every custom ID you've applied.
Yeah, so Taylor, for your question about the campaign entities table, I believe that's right. That it's removed from from that table rather than showing deleted. So I don't think there's a way to see which campaigns they were previously on. Although that is an issue I remember running into at some point a while ago, and I do think it would be a good thing to implement some way to undo the. Actually, the one place it might, does it show in the activity stream, Martha? Do you know?
No, remove person
Yeah.
from a campaign does not show in the activity stream. And when you do remove a person from the campaign, they are like that connection between a campaign entity and the campaign entities table is gone. What is preserved though is if any assessments were applied in that campaign, any responses were applied in that campaign, there's sort of like a shadow presence of that entity in the campaign through that, through those other tables. But yeah, hear you on that. Does Action Builder label SQL Mirror fields and tables as they get deprecated? We have not encountered much deprecation.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I don't, as far as I know, I don't think any tables have been deprecated. Like there's actually, I guess the taggable logbook table. So, no, I think those tables actually just like, there used to be like a, entities tags or people tags table that just got removed, and like the people table changed entities. So I don't think there's, they're not labeled. There was a kind of there was a discussion when, about change, it's definitely the case that like some of the tables do not match up with how things are labeled in the interface. There was, we discussed like, should we prioritize like renaming all the tables, and what we heard from the developers was like, it was just going to be really hard, which isn't to say we couldn't do it, but we did like, as like a group kind of thought that spending the time it would take to relabel all the tables, and then which would also kind of break all of the existing dashboards and queries would not be worth it compared to actually doing like feature development work.
That's right. And just like a quick recap, because maybe not everybody on the call is aware, we build all of our tools cooperatively. And what that means is that a big part of my role, and Jeff as well, like we convene a meeting of a group of people every month to talk about like what needs to change in the tool or not. Action Builder has a partnership with the AFL-CIO to build out this tool set for the movement. And we like to say that we can build anything. It's just a matter of where we want to allocate our time. And the idea of allocating a bunch of time to renaming the tables, it didn't make sense when we could spend that time improving the user experience for more users. That isn't to say it won't come, but it's not the highest of priorities. We do have a question about, can I custom rename the tables fields in the SQL Mirror just for my organization? If you're using Tableau, you can create views really easily, and like you can name those, the columns in those views, whatever you want. And I would highly recommend, like as a first step towards building out your reporting, like creating some custom views to just, put the data in a format that would make more sense for your reporting projects. And then, yeah, name them whatever.
But the mirror itself is read only, so you can't rename anything. But you could, yeah. And the other thing that I don't know if anyone's done it with Action Builder. I know some people have done it with Action Network. Like you can, like is to, if you have a data warehouse that you use for other things, you could pull, you could replicate the replica. You could feed information into your data warehouse, and you could do like transformation on it in that process. If that was like something that was going to be worthwhile.
Yep, and there was a note in the chat, SQL Mirror documentation, not in the Help Center. It is a Google Doc, and I just dropped the Google Doc into the chat. We'll also send that around to everybody after the call. But that's your reference place here. The plan is to add this documentation to the Help Center, which is just like a quick copy paste. And then also adding a section for additional sample queries, some fun things there. And I did drop my email into the chat as well. If you want to be showcased with some sample SQL documentation, we'd love to showcase your queries. Just shoot me an email with your queries that you'd be happy to share attached, and we'll get those up there. Does SQL Mirror data entry look like data entry field? Yeah. So all of the responses look exactly the same as the responses in the user interface. So names can have accents, all of that. And yes, you do email me if you want access to the SQL Mirror. Great question, Julie. Thank you, everyone. What other questions can we answer for you today? You can definitely use a VPN for SQL Mirror access. And you should be able to use it for the Action Network SQL Mirror as well. Questions in the chat? Other folks? A question about accessing the SQL Mirror via Tableau. We'd love to help you with that, Christina. So just shoot me an email and we can help you get set up. One of the things to keep in mind with Tableau and other services like that is there's usually some other IPs that need to be whitelisted. And so we'll need to talk through the security of that. For instance, sometimes Google Data Studio wants you to whitelist all of the Google servers everywhere versus not. So that's something we'll talk through with you. I'd love to do like a quick little raise hands poll. How many of you would like us to do this again? Talk through additional questions as they come up. Maybe share some more sample SQL queries. Sweet.
Yeah, and if anyone is like would like to if has been using the mirror and we want to demo kind of the reports that you've been building, I think that would be awesome for the next time, is to get some more some more like real world use cases out there would be really cool to see.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining. We'll send out some follow-up emails to you all. And I'm excited to do this again. So look forward to doing that with you. And many thanks to Jeff Mann. Thank you, Jeff, for joining this, and to our Jeff as well. And then, yes, there is a recording that can be sent out. So when I shoot you all the thank you email, feel free to request that email, that recording from me directly. Great. Thanks, everybody.